Welcome to another episode of the Embodied Union podcast. I'm Charlie.
I'm Lindsay.
And today we're continuing our conversation around relationship as a skill, and we're going to focus on repair.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah.
Probably one of the unsung heroes and skills, in my opinion, of a relationship.
And the lack of capacity to repair is definitely the biggest pain point in relationship.
Yeah.
Like getting into conflict and it just really being conflict.
Yeah, and so many couples are stuck in the cycle of fighting and repairing and, well, not actually repairing, or just fighting and holding on and
brushing things under the rug, or just like, we'll talk about it another time, or it's just...
we don't fight or we don't have any conflict in our relationship, and it's like, like what's not being spoken about in that relationship?
Because relationship tension is 100% normal. Like you're dealing, like I'm a human, you're a human. As much as we endeavor to do this kind of work, like we're still human. So tension is a part of relationship, but arguing is 100% avoidable, I believe.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think if couples could have this skill and learn this skill, it's like, imagine if all the energy that you had in your relationship went towards the love of it and the tendering of it and the care for it, rather than the conflict, the war, the fighting, all those things that we're trying to do, which is like power control and just...
Well, I think in the beginning of a relationship, all the energy does go into the beautiful aspects. But then because couples don't have the skill of repair, we get water under the bridge, resentment, unspoken words, unhealed hurts. So then the energy does start being probably not, it's not conscious, but energy is going towards just kind of manage all this tension I feel in my own system, all this tension I feel towards my partner, and like there is no energy to direct towards the more loving aspects of relationship. But if couples knew how to repair from the beginning, then I think it would avoid water under the bridge, resentment building up.
So I guess we could probably look at it, I was just thinking then, maybe in two different parts of like acute repair, like what's happening right now, and maybe conversations around like things that have happened over a longer period of time and how couples can repair and move through those as well. Because I think they're both two avenues of skill around repair that would be valid or really good for couples to sort of learn about and know about.
I think important as well is discussing what are the blocks to repair? Like, why isn't repair, like we all like to think we're here to be in love and do relationship, but when we get triggered, repair goes out the window. It suddenly becomes something that I'm not available for because I'm too in my mad. So It's like there's big blocks to repair. I think people have the best intentions, especially starting out, because they're dealing with all of their unconscious core material and their unhealed stuff. It can make repair challenging.
Well, let's go into that. I think that would be a good place to start then, like the blocks to repair. What are we being... So there's being right, being wrong. There's right or true and not true. What other aspects do you feel like there's blocks in it?
Well, I know for myself, I've struggled with repair in every other relationship bar this one. This one seems to be I'm getting better at it. But the biggest block was when I felt triggered, I felt stuck.
Right.
When I'm triggered, I feel like I've been made wrong or you've done something wrong to me. And even though there's this part of me that wants to be in love, wants to be in relationship, there's my little girl part who's just kind of like, how dare you? The audacity that you could do me wrong. So her stubbornness would really come in and would drag conflict on because it's like she had a point to prove. I think for me it was, if I stay stuck in my mad and I punish you enough, then you'll never do that to me again. So that kept me in like a freeze response and unable to repair until I'd gotten what I thought I wanted, which was often like to feel really seen or heard or have my partner acknowledge what I believed they'd done wrong. And then I might soften, but that was why I struggled with repair. What about you?
Mine would definitely be around fairness, it being unfair. in my life. And the other one would be unable to repair would also be around like defensiveness. So I would like stonewall or gaslight, not intentionally, but it would be that I would put it back onto the other.
See, this is what I mean. Like, we have these unconscious, unhealed parts that are the blocks to repair. So, yes, we want to learn the skills of repair, but as we always advocate for, individuals doing their own inner healing work so you can start to work through these blocks so that effective repair is even possible.
Yeah, and I think for other couples, it's like if the listeners are listening to this, it's like, yeah, what are my blocks? Like, where do I get stuck? Is it that person that, you know, they've done me wrong and I need them to know? Or do I have like, rejection or abandonment or frustration or anger, or I've been abused or abandoned in the past, so I'm going to make sure that my partner like almost suffers for that?
I think this is like, for a lot of people, this stuff is outside of conscious awareness. So it does take a level of self-inquiry and like willingness to have a look at your own stuff. Because the reason why conflict goes so wrong is because we fall into trigger and we're blind to what we are bringing, our own defense mechanisms, like what are toxic patterns that we're bringing. We're so focused on what the other's doing wrong. We go into this like mechanism of projection and blame. And
everyone's ex is a narcissist though, right?
Yeah.
You know, like anytime I hear that, I'm like, oh God, like that is such a strong word to use for somebody else. It's like, how about we just be responsible for what we can be responsible for?
I honestly think this is one of the best things a couple can learn when it comes to repair, is just say we have a moment of, we go into trigger meeting trigger, and then we're like, we're going to take 5, we're going to take 10, we're going to take an hour to go and self-regulate, because when we're both in trigger meeting trigger, it's not productive. One person has to be regulated for us to be able to create repair. So if both are in trigger meeting trigger, okay, cool, let's take some time to focus on self-regulating. And in that time, not to sit there with your mind spinning about how wrong your partner's, how they've treated you.
I'm formulating the next assault.
Well, this is what I used to do. I would go into, if I was to take space, I would just sit and start thinking about how I'd been treated wrong. And that's so unproductive. If you actually can, all right, yes, there's a part of me that really feels made wrong by my partner, like maybe their language or their behavior isn't something that I like want to tolerate, and we can get to that. But it's like, what did I just bring to that dynamic? What did I bring? What was my toxicity? What was my pattern? What do I play out? Because then when you come back together and if you genuinely want to repair, if both parties can be in the acknowledgement of what they brought to the chaos they just experienced, it creates a softening. Like we had a little moment last week, I think it was, and we took some time. And when we came back together, you sat straight down on the bed and you were like, I did this, I did this, I did this, I did this. And you just owned all the parts that played out for you. And immediately my guard goes down, because that part of me just wants to hear you acknowledge something.
There's nothing to defend. There's nothing to defend. If couples knew that if they just took responsibility for their part and were okay about exposing those parts, then there's nothing for the other person to do. We already own it. I own that part.
It's like the Eminem, it's like the rap battle. It's like when he goes up there and he just owns everything. So it's like, oh, I've got nothing. But when you did that, you came in and you owned a whole bunch of things. It then just gave me space to be like, oh, and I did this and I did this and I did this. It just created a softening where I could take responsibility. So it's really, when there's conflict, getting yourself regulated enough so that you can come away from that mechanism of projection and blame and start being a detective to your own stuff and what you brought. And maybe your partner did do something that needs to be like, that's not the way we do this.
Yeah.
But still focusing more on yourself and how you can do it better, and then you guys bring that to discussion, that moves the repair along in a really productive way.
Yeah, and I think the real pitfall here then is if I'm unwilling to take any responsibility for my part in it, that's when it stalemates. And I see that on both parts, men and women.
Yes.
Some women are notorious for not taking responsibility. That's kind of like a joke almost, that women won't take responsibility about things. But it's like, men don't do that either. And so it's not a gender
human thing.
Exactly. So it's like, if one partner, if I was to take all like that responsibility, if I was to sit down and go, I did this, I did this, and then you turn around and go, yeah, you did it like this, you did it like that, it kind of like, I think it opens up the door for like, can we both take some responsibility here?
Well, if you've come in and you're being very vulnerable and you're like, I've looked at the dynamic and I can see what I contributed, and then I meet that with like, yeah, you did, that's going to put your defense straight back up. And then we're back in trigger meeting trigger. So it's like, if both can just focus on acknowledging what they brought, then it creates the softening, it opens for a more productive conversation, and then we can move into, and how can it be different next time? Because maybe I still don't like the way that you spoke to me, or I don't like how that went down. We still can.
Yeah, I guess I'm making this point is, how does someone that's listening to this have the experience of like them revealing and then taking ownership, and then their partner still being in the right and wrong and projecting that? It's, you know.
Do you mean when one party has like really taken responsibility and they're doing a good job, and then they bring that and their partner's still in trigger, and it's like, all right, so yeah, that happens a lot.
It does, and that's where I feel like, you know, you might do a great job and your partner is still unwilling to repair with you. That's another thing. That's when it becomes like, can I hold space for them to have whatever they need said, so they can get to the point of calming down, being understood at least. Because you might say something and I can acknowledge it. I can go, yeah, this is what I heard you say, and I don't have to agree with it, but I can at least acknowledge it. Because I think if we're feeling, couples that both feel unacknowledged by each other, that's like a blow up waiting to happen.
I think the thing people really need to get on board with is the idea that neither of you are right and neither of you are wrong. It's like, I have my experience and you have yours, and both are valid. So how can I hold that both are true?
Yes.
You know, because then that takes me out of it. I'm right, so you have to agree with me. It's like, I can hold that I have my experience and you have yours, and then there's space to not only, it creates a bit more compassion for the person. It's like, I'm not, what you're saying, maybe I don't agree with it because that's not how I experienced it, but I can imagine for you, if that's how you experienced it, then that would be shit. So it's like, I can understand why you feel like that based on how you perceive that.
Yeah, rather than invalidating it.
That didn't happen.
Well, that's not how I interpreted it.
That's not what I meant.
Exactly. It's like every time we try and defend ourselves in that way, we tend to invalidate the other. So this is blocks to repair here, you know? So it's, how can I be curious with you? How can I validate your experience? And how can I own my part in it such that we get to be then on the same team? We get to soften with each other rather than letting things fester and stew and build and stonewall and go, well, we're not getting anywhere, so we're just going to have to leave it.
Which is just water under the bridge.
Just sitting there for next time.
The right flavor trigger comes along down the track, and it's like we suddenly still have all these unresolved things. It's like couples are really fighting about the dishes. They're fighting about all the things that haven't been resolved, built up over time. So, and
sometimes and this is what I was getting at before. So it's like, what do we do when there's an acute argument or acute disagreement? So in the moment, and then there's also the repairing of relationship that's come long before I was even in your life, you know, and that's where I feel like if you're committed to your relationship and to your partnership, there's going to be some element of repair needed in your partner that you can hold yourself and to support them with, that wasn't for you to actually, like, you didn't create it, but it's there.
So what you're saying, I understand you now. It's like we each come with our emotional baggage.
Yeah.
I have my emotional baggage that was in my system way before I met you, and I am going to bring that in. And I'm going to get triggered by things that you say or do that are
Yes.
less to do with what you're doing in the moment, but it's really bringing up my unhealed stuff. And it's knowing that relationship is designed to do that. It's designed to
Yes.
bring up the chronic unhealed parts, and we get to support each other in healing those.
Yes.
So I think it's a really good distinction. Like those arguments that we have in the moment that really are to do with our dynamic.
Now, yeah.
And like, how do we move through those? I think when we did our podcast on like self-revealing, that really speaks to how to manage those.
Mm-hmm.
So if you haven't listened to that one, go back. But essentially what it is, it's naming in the moment the triggers that come up for you so that they're not festering. It's like, I'm going to reveal what's going on for me, the trigger, the contraction, and we work through it in real time. And then when we're dealing with those, like your emotional baggage and my emotional baggage, I think the first part is just recognizing that your partner has, like, we're all doing that. We're all bringing this baggage free of charge, so it's going to come up. So utilizing those moments to actually create the deepest healing. Because like, just for example, one of my like triggers that was there way before you would be jealousy. So that's going to come up in our relationship, and it has.
And this is the thing that I want to speak to for the listeners is it's so easy in relationship to take our partner personally.
To take my old baggage, make it mean something about you.
Yes. So it's like, if I can hold that that's actually not personal, what you have already,
Yes.
then I can hold it in a much sweeter way, in a better way that helps the repair happen.
Not only does it help repair happen, it helps the healing happen, because my stuff's coming up, and then when it's met with compassion and love, that part of me gets to soften and to heal. But when that part of me comes up, if it's met with your defense or you taking it personally, then I go deeper into my trigger, and we've missed an opportunity.
Or I can't bring that to this relationship. He can't, he can't hold that of me, so I can't bring that. Like, if I can't be myself around you, then I have to be less of who I am. Then that becomes like, I can't give you as much of my heart either. And that can happen in relationship too. So if your partner is bringing you stuff that's unhealed and you're unable to hold it, then they can retract, and then you get less of their love and less of their experience because you're getting less of their expression. Like, I want to know that when I bring my stuff to my partner, and I do it in a way that's respectful and mindful, that if they can hold it, then I can heal it. You know, if it can be acknowledged, then that's the first step in healing it, is accepting it, or at least having some awareness around it.
I think this is the fundamental difference between an embodied union, sacred union, conscious relationship, and like a more mainstream, like muggle relationship. Whereas we have the awareness that shit's going to come up, and we're going to utilize this relationship to the best of our ability for growth and supporting each other's healing. Whereas a couple that doesn't have this awareness, it's just trigger meeting trigger. It's like taking things personally, defense mechanisms, like
tit for tat, hiding things.
It loops around and around and around. And so it really, like, conflict is inevitable, but how you navigate it is so different when you have this level of awareness. It's like, I feel like these skills are so important.
And this is how you have a great relationship. It's not just based on love, right? This is what I'm always trying to teach men. It's like, it's not the honeymoon period, the new relationship energy and love and lust that drives, or the foundation of a relationship is built upon. It's built upon, like, you know, agreements and skills and authenticity and those things. And then as a result, love and intimacy all happens. You know, that's the tip of the iceberg. All the real base of the relationship is around these skills, you know? So it's like, if there is a conflict or there is upset, that we create clarity. And that clarity then gets us clear on our agreements and our boundaries. And then we're working together. And so it's like, instead of, we're trying to avoid conflicts, we're not trying to make them either. We're not trying to have a chaotic
But bring
relationship.
it on when it's here.
Yeah, it's like, yes, this is like something that we get to work on to make better. So we strengthen our relationship.
Yes, I think that's a really beautiful sign of like, it's when you come through conflict and you actually go deeper into intimacy. That's the experience I have with you. Every time something comes up and then we repair it, it's just like, oh, I love you even more. I love you even more that we could do that together and we could go through that, and like,
yeah,
it's a really beautiful experience. Intimacy.
Absolutely. And one of those pitfalls, I want to mention it, is the fighting and fucking cycle. So it's just making sure that we're not creating conflict in our relationship to create an excitement or a push and a pull.
This is often unconscious though. Couples they're not doing this consciously, but it can be both, one or both. They're unconsciously creating tension, good or bad, conflict. So that can drive the physical connection and
or proves love somehow, you know?
I think this is a bigger conversation, or it's a different conversation, because it's actually really speaking into the unconscious patterns that are driving in relationship, which I think is a really important conversation to have. But I don't know if many couples have the awareness, because it's definitely like those cycles, as painful as they are, they're often happening outside of awareness. They're just happening, and it's like, why are we looping?
Do you feel like that comes more into like attachment theory? And maybe
Absolutely.
We could do a little episode on that, do you think?
We definitely need to speak into attachment. Yep, absolutely. And insecure attachment patterns and how those play out in relationship.
Avoidant patterns, yeah.
Anxious patterns, all of it. But I think as far as conflict, I think it would be really good to give some like tangible ways for couples to move through conflict, or like what are some things that are supportive in the heat of the moment. It's like, what are the actual tools? Because we can speak about how we manage it.
Yeah, well, I think, what constitutes conflict in one of the ways is the two parties involved, typically it's a two-person relationship, is both are feeling triggered. I think that kind of like decides that there's...
Now we're in conflict. We've moved from like self-revealing or...
Yeah, I'm triggered and I want to bring that, and then I brought it, and then at some point maybe you're unable to hold it.
So we've gone into conflict.
Yeah.
Cool. So what I think is important is you set this up in the conflict plan. So when you're regulated and totally in love, it's like, let's come up with a conflict plan so that in the heat of the moment, we can rely on the plan without dismissing our partner by trying to say, this is what we should do. It's like, I know we agreed to a plan. So when you notice that we're both in meeting trigger, somebody has to notice that, and whoever notices it first has to name it. Is the winner. Now they have to name it. They have to just say, look, can we just acknowledge, not that anyone's right or wrong, but we're in meeting trigger. Let's just name that. Yeah. And you've given each other permission to be able to do that. So it's like, okay, he's not dismissing me. We did agree. And it's like, yes, we can both acknowledge we're in meeting trigger. When we're in meeting trigger, it's very unlikely that you're going to create repair. So it's like, okay, what's the plan here? So what we've decided that we do is we take 5. We take 10, we take 15, whatever it is. And it's not to sit and scroll on our phone. It's really not to sit and think about how badly you treated me. It is to use that short little time to self-regulate.
The way I've done it is I go away and I journal, because I can loop quite easily or disassociate. So for me, it really helps me write it down, like what happened, what did I make it mean, where could I have done better, and that helps me stay focused. Another thing that I could do quite easily is like an embodiment practice, like some meditation, some breathing, just to like calm my body down, because I'm noticing like the feeling of like fight or flight or fawn, whatever it is in my system. It's like, those are the things. So it can look very different for different people.
Yeah.
What do you find?
I honestly find journaling the most helpful, because I can loop quite quickly. The mind, like we suffer when we buy into the thoughts that we're having. So actually putting them down onto paper slows them down enough for me to be objective. So I'll often write down what just happened, and then what did I make it mean? And then I'll write down, why am I mad at Lindsay? And then it's like, what were my toxic patterns just then? And sometimes I can write, Lindsay did this, Lindsay did this, Lindsay did this, and I might only get like 1 or 2 for me, but it still is creating this little bit of separation between like just being so identified with my victim and like there's a bigger picture here, starting to really look at all the parts. So that, and then just say I have 5-10 more minutes, I've made a commitment to myself that, because my toxic pattern is to stay stuck in my mad because I just keep thinking about it. So I'll reflect and then I'll do something else. I might do a bit of work. I might actually go and do something that's not related to what we're going through, because that creates even more separation for me.
Yes.
That's actually the best medicine for me, because then when we come back together, my mood's actually shifted because I've gone and it's usually work. I'll go do some work and then I'm willing to discuss our journaling and like, where did you get to? Where did I get to? But I've actually shifted my state from actually just taking myself completely out of it and into something else.
It's really good. It actually makes me think, I just want to preface the drama triangle, because I feel like this conflict part could also be helpful to notice this as well. So it's like in the drama triangle, there's the victim, the rescuer, and the perpetrator, or the persecutor. And it's in this, when I'm noticing this for myself, is like, how am I being the victim in this? You know, and how am I being the persecutor or perpetrator in this as well?
I think there would be really good prompts. It's like, how am I being a victim right now? And you write it all down.
Yeah, because how's this unfair? Because a lot of the time for each individual, it's we feel wronged or hard done by, and then we justify our actions because of our perceived hurt. And it's like, is that even the truth? Like, any time that I'm like certain in an argument, I know that that's my ego trying to create that for me, and I actually can't objectively see what's fully playing out because I'm too in it.
So if you know you're right, that's a really good sign that there's some space to have a bigger look.
Yeah, be curious. Be more curious with it. So the drama triangle, the opposite of the victim in the drama triangle is the creator. So it's, how do I create myself out of this? What do I need to create to move through this?
As in, what's the action step I need to take to
not be a victim anymore?
Not be in my victim?
Yeah. And so what I then find for me when I'm in this is I'm actually just really committed to being in love. My relationship, I don't want to fight in my relationship. I just know that something happened just then, and I didn't mean it, and I know you never mean it either. So it's like, how do we work towards something here? So that's why for me, I'm the number one repairer, is because like I've had a lot of conflict in my relationship in the past, and I don't want to do that because it causes damage in the long run. And any unexpressed mad and any unexpressed sad typically leads to resentment. So that's the calcification in a relationship, is unexpressed mad and sad.
Which is why self-revealing as you go is the antidote to any of those things, just like building up. It's like you just keep putting a lid on things, the pressure cooker, until you explode when you leave a towel on the floor.
Yeah, it ends up not being the thing. So we've got this repair now, and we come back together. Typically then we share to each other just how we were responsible. So when we do come back together, we might sit down together, knee to knee, eye to eye, similar to this, and typically have a bit of a conversation around this. Maybe there's some touch, but it's nothing too much straight away. It's more just like, can we just own this? And what we're also noticing for ourselves is, if we start to do this and one of us still feels triggered, it's just we need a bit more time. We don't want to force it either.
And that can happen. It's like you come back together and it's like, I'm still mad.
Yeah, I need more time. It's like,
or
okay.
I need to say something more. I need to express something more. It's like, if there's still mad, it's like, we can't quite repair.
And coming back, and I know this is like, for me, this is men's work 101, but it's using I language. So I did this, I'm responsible for that, I could have done this better.
And I think the imago dialogue is really helpful as well. So it's like I language, but also, and we speak about this as cleaning the glass, the Kiminami process. But when you have imago dialogue, it's like I'm going to speak. You give me space to say I, and I share, and you're just listening. You're not going to interject. You're not going to try and validate. You're not even going to say you're right. It's like you're really just holding space to hear me. And then when I'm finished sharing, you're going to repeat back what I said.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to repeat it back so I know that I'm heard. And that gives me this internal just like sigh of relief. And if you didn't repeat it back quite right, I'm going to say that's not what I said, and we go again.
Yeah.
And then we would swap. You would share and I would listen. And the thing to really notice in this is when your partner is sharing, are you truly giving them the gift of your presence, or are you in your head thinking, well, that's not what happened, that's not what I did, I'm going to wait for my turn to speak and I'm going to say that? It's like you really don't want to be doing that. It's like, how can you just be, maybe you're focusing on like some movement in your fingers or like your breath, just something to keep you anchored and just really hear without having this internal dialogue of defense. But I think, I language, imago dialogue, that kind of stuff, when you do come back to sharing, is what kind of moves the needle a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Then once that's done, typically I find we're both puddles at that point, and we're able to do some type of physical contact for repair or for closure. Like it could be a hug, or it could be you sitting in my lap, or whatever it is.
That's kind of like the thing that cements the repair. Like we have these conversations and it's like, still not quite there. And then you'll pull me into your lap and we'll just breathe together, be quite still. And then you really feel the softening then. It's like, the heart cracks back open and it's like, we're complete. We've come full circle. We're back in the bubble.
Yeah, and I think the beauty of that is for couples in relationship is this is part of co-regulation. This is part of the beauty of being in a relationship, because you can have that. Like, I know for some people, I'm sure they're like, I don't want to do any of that with my partner. If they be an asshole to me, they can sort it out. I'm not putting up with that. But it's like, there's beauty in this part of like co-regulating and being seen and having conflict planned, because it's not just your intimate relationship, it's all relationships. It's the one with yourself, it's the one with your family, it's the one with your colleagues at work or your friends. It's like the ability to repair is so awesome, that you're sitting in your life in less conflict because you're able to have a plan, you're able to do it, not waiting for the other person to be always the one to repair for you. Like, to me, that's almost embarrassing to me. If someone has to come to me to repair with me first, it's like, I needed to do that. I want to take ownership of that. As long as I'm ready to repair, but I think
it's just important to have awareness around it isn't just your partner that's always leading it. It's like noticing that if you're never the one to initiate repair, maybe that's something you can be in the practice of, because ultimately, why are you together? You want to be in love rather over being right. And if you really can't repair, if you really can't move through your own defenses, if you really have so much resentment built up in your relationship, then it's really worth getting some outside eyes and support in to either guide you through mediation with your partner and also to start helping you work through your blocks to repair.
Yeah, big time.
And I think it's important.
Yeah, and that is so true. It's like, booking in a one-on-one with a therapist, or booking in some relationship counseling or a program, or doing something as a couple together. Like if you're with your forever person, this is like 101. Like this is important and urgent to learn the skills of this kind of stuff in relationship.
And if you have little humans, like you're modeling repair, or you're modeling a lack of repair. So it's just such a skill that makes relationship not only epic, but it allows it to be a growth and healing oriented space.
Yeah. I think that we hit it. That was good.
I think that covers it as far as conflict goes. If you guys have questions or more clarity, you can always send us a message. You can find us on Instagram, Embodied Union. Lindsay works with men, I work with women, and together we work with couples. So, yeah.
Thank you so much for tuning in.
Thank you.
We'll see you guys next week.
Thank you, my love.
Love you, Krill.